I was in Philadelphia just a couple weekends ago. I went up there for a wedding, and it's my first time in Philadelphia in probably 9 years or so. Not a city that I frequent very often. We stayed in a hotel in city center downtown Philadelphia. It wasn't even part of the worst parts of the city or anything like that. But actually, let's take a look before I talk about what I saw in City Center. Actually, let's actually see at first just how bad it actually is in Kensington Avenue in Philadelphia. So let's look at this tweet from presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. Let's go to element number one. Now, those of you who follow me closely know that I am not Vivek's biggest fan, but I'm happy that Vivek shined a spotlight on what's going on here on the actual worst parts of Philadelphia. So let's go ahead and watch this video of what Vivek shine this spotlight on here in Kensington Avenue. I mean, look at this. It looks like a zombie apocalypse. I mean, look at the homeless encampments everywhere. I mean, almost impossible to think what it would be like to live here. And I genuinely, in many ways, do feel terrible for the people who do live in neighborhoods like that. Unfortunately, this is not necessarily just Philadelphia. I mean, anyone who has been to a number of other big cities has seen exactly what this looks like. But man, I mean, that clip should really kind of just scar you if you're not already scarred. But back to my trip, I thank God was not staying there in Kensington Avenue area. I was staying downtown, and the point that I wanted to make is, it didn't look like that, thank goodness, but it was pretty bad. It was really pretty bad. I mean, it was so bad that my fiance actually took her engagement ring and kind of turned it around, basically, to not show the diamond when we were kind of walking in the street. And again, we were staying in the city center of downtown Philadelphia. The first thing you notice walking around downtown Philadelphia, and this is not uncommon to Philly again, I mean, Los Angeles, San Francisco, all these cities kind of had this by now. The stench of marijuana is literally everywhere. And, I'm not sure what the marijuana laws are in Philadelphia. In Pennsylvania, I don't know if it's legal, illegal. So whatever. I mean, if you're doing it in your home, if it's legal under state law, I don't think it should be. That's a conversation for another day. But they're in the public, walking on the sidewalk. That stench is literally everywhere. And, what we saw there, those needles in the video with Vivek, you saw some of those needles kind of laying around the sidewalks in downtown Philadelphia as well. The storefronts are closed, boarded up. I mean, the occupancy rate for commercial real estate in downtown Philly has got to be like no more than 50, 60%. I mean, the number of buildings that I walked through that were just totally vacant is really just crazy. And, what is partially responsible for what is happening in Philadelphia? Well, Philadelphia, like many of these other cities, has a George Soros-funded prosecutor. Surprise, surprise. I mean, those of you who follow these trends know that you should not be particularly surprised by that. So this is Larry Krasner, is the district attorney for the city of Philadelphia. He has, for better or for worse, really the latter, for worse, made quite a name for himself in recent years. He is right up there with Alvin Bragg in New York City, with Kimberly Fox in Chicago, Illinois, George Gascon in Los Angeles. He is kind of the quintessential George Soros-funded prosecutor. And, I say Soros-funded prosecutor repeatedly for a reason, which is that George Soros is not hiding what he is trying to do to these cities. In fact, he had an op-ed last July, so almost a year ago now, in the Wall Street Journal, literally saying why he supports reform prosecutors, why he supports progressive prosecutors who, put another way, literally run and then get elected on a platform of not prosecuting. So if that sounds oxymoronic and frankly idiotic, that's because it is both oxymoronic and idiotic. So Larry Krasner is the district attorney of Philadelphia, and he doesn't have a particularly strong interest, again, in actually prosecuting time. Going back to our prior segment on this vindication of a colorblind constitution, a colorblind rule of law, Larry Krasner, in line with other Soros-funded prosecutors, thinks the absolute opposite. He is progressive, i.e. he agrees with Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson in dissent in the affirmative action cases, insofar as he explicitly takes race into account in his prosecutorial decisions. Again, he says this very explicitly. So let's go ahead and take a look here at element number 2, which was this very recent article in the Philadelphia Inquirer here. So look at the headline here. Black Philadelphians are overrepresented at every stage of the criminal justice system, DA says. The report analyzed 290,000 cases, concluded that Black Philadelphians were more likely to be charged with felonies and overassessed, et cetera, et cetera. And if you can't read the report that Larry Krasner, the Philadelphia Soros-funded DA, is holding up there in his hand, The report is entitled, quote, Racial Injustice Report. So the point here, again, is that these prosecutors get there. They think that they are there not necessarily to enforce the law, God forbid, or to prosecute felons or various other miscreants, God forbid. They are there to do social justice, to make the world better in their very dystopian conception of how to make the world better. And again, for those of us who went to law school, and you take criminal law your first year of law school, you learn about the various kind of black letter elements of what is a homicide, a manslaughter, murder, like all the crimes like that, larceny, all this stuff. Racial injustice, okay, to put it mildly, is not a thing that you learn about in criminal law. So this is not law. This is extra legal is what I'm trying to say. It's really just fundamentally just a broader attempt to reshape these societies. I mean, that's all it is. And unfortunately, these Soros-funded DAs, George Soros and his son Alexander have now gotten successfully elected 75 district attorneys all across America. Larry Krasner is just one of the 75. And I mentioned Chicago, Alvin Bragg in New York, George Gascon in Los Angeles. Some of America's biggest cities actually have Soros-funded prosecutors. In fact, roughly 20% of Americans actually live under Soros-funded prosecutorial regimes. And if you think that what's happening in Philadelphia is a one-off, I am here to assure you, unfortunately, that it is not a one-off. In fact, I was in Chicago just last year. I lived in Chicago for 3 years, actually. I lived a little south of downtown. When I was living there, and I was living there from 2013, 2016, not that long ago, you knew that there were some neighborhoods to avoid, but you knew that the nice neighborhoods were still perfectly nice. Well, actually, when I was there last year, just over a year ago, again with my fiance, her very nice purse was stolen by a panhandler inside of a sports bar in a very nice part of the city. I talked to Chicago police afterwards to say I was flipping out. I was cussing. I was not my best self, obviously, standing up for my better half. Chicago Police Department looked at me like, what the hell is wrong with you? What do you want us to do? We've got like a million murders going on here. We're not going to care about some girl's purse that was stolen. And again, this is happening all across the country. In fact, one of my good friends was actually just out in San Francisco, which is maybe the worst of the worst. And he sent an email. It was a private email he sent to some of his buddies, including me. I'm just going to read an excerpt of this email, actually. Really, really, really absolutely crazy stuff here. So this email says, quote, he's talking here about San Francisco. Quote, the downtown area is gutted. Market Street is a disaster. Along almost its entire length, from the Civic Center to Embarcadero and in the surrounding neighborhoods, commercial storefronts are almost all empty except for liquor stores. After nightfall, the sidewalks were crowded by groups of homeless people, most of whom looked like they were on drugs and/or severely mentally ill. The only people walking with purpose looked to be selling drugs or women. The ground was covered with all manner of filth.
Hi guys, it's Liz Wheeler. Don't forget to watch my show, The Liz Wheeler Show, every night at 7 p.m. on the First TV. You can download the free First TV app, or you can visit thefirsttv.com/Liz and start watching today.